Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Vidyan Karava Vahai Tejasvi Navadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Repeat after me. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Naram Chaiva Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Devim Saraswatim Tato Jayamudirayeta Tato. Very good. Welcome back. We'll continue our introduction to the Mahabharata. We are taking some time to go through some of the introductory portions because we're going to be studying this Mahabharata for quite a while. I think the number of verses we've chosen should keep us going for maybe 3 years. So it's just to put things in perspective, and it's worth getting some fairly good introduction to the text. So that's why we're saying some of the opening sections. But as I said, our intent is to focus on the philosophical portions, the portions which are very Vedantic. But we need to get our hands around the story a little bit more. So we'll continue that. Before we resume in this 54th chapter, look at this, chapter 54, and we're still getting the introduction. And if you remember my comment from the last class, the Mahabharata starts twice. It started in chapter 1, then it went off and started talking for several dozen chapters, talking about the snakes. And then and culminating in the Sarpa Yajna in Janamajaya's ritual, in which he's going to kill all the snakes. So after that whole section, then we begin again. The text begins again. Let me just, for the sake of orientation, let me remind you the 3 levels of story that we're dealing with. The outermost level of the story takes place in Naimisha Aranya. And in that forest, we see the professional storyteller, Suta, who is telling the story to the great sage Shaunaka. And then there's the inner story of which takes place at that Sarpa ritual. Sarpa Satra is the name for it. Satra means yajna. It's more elaborate. A simple one is called yajna. A very elaborate one would be called satra. So in the Sarpa Satra, we find Vaishampayana, who is a disciple of Vyasa. Disciple of Vyasa, who is narrating it to King Janamejaya. At that Sarpa Satra. So what we've seen so far is that the opening scene is in the forest, and then we see, and what we're going to pick up today, is Vyasa along with Vaishampayana show up at Shaunaka's ritual in the Naimisharanya, and then that discussion takes place. And then what we're going to see in the next class, or maybe at the end of this class, is Vaishampayana narrating the actual story that we think about Mahabharata, which takes place not only in Hastinapur, but largely, and also on the battlefield, also. Hastinapura. This is a story about Bhishma and the Kauravas and Pandavas and all of that. So what we need to see are these 3 levels of story. If we don't keep the levels straight, we get confused really fast. All right. So we see the story of whatever happened on the battlefield and in the city of Hastinapura is narrated by Vaishampayana through Janamejaya, and whatever... I'm sorry, I misspoke before, by the way. Sutta was present when Vaishampayana, I apologize, I misspoke a moment ago. When Vaishampayana was narrating the story, Vaishampayana heard the story from Vyasa, just to review what we saw in the last class. Vaishampayana heard the story from his guru, Vyasa. Vaishampayana is narrating it during the Sarpa Satra. Remember in the breaks during the rituals? We talked about that in the last class. So during the breaks in the rituals, he narrates it to the king Janamejaya, who is conducting the Sarpa Satra. Then we said that one of the people present at this time was Sutta. Sutta is a professional storyteller. And then he shows up at Naimisha Aranya, and then he narrates that same story to Shaunaka. So third level, Vyasa. What Vyasa saw first person. So Vyasa was present in Hastinapura. So what Vyasa saw first person was then narrated to Vaishampayana. From Vaishampayana, Sutta heard, Sutta narrates it to Shaunaka. Okay, enough introduction. We're just going to pick up the thread where we left off. And this is where we left off is Vyasa, together with Vaishampayana and a bunch of his disciples, are arriving at Janamejaya's Sarpa Satra. So we are in the middle. Just back up and see. So what we're seeing is still narrated by, this is narrated by Sutta. So in the outermost story, Sutta is narrating this to Shaunaka, and Sutta is narrating the arrival of Vyasa and Vaishampayana and his disciples. He's narrating the arrival at the Sarpa Satra. And why is Sutta is narrating Vyasa's arrival at the Sarpa Satra. Why is he narrating? Two reasons. One is Shaunaka asked him to. Second reason is he was present at this Sarpa Satra, and that's why he is narrating it. Okay. Then we'll pick up with this 10th verse. No, we saw 10th verse, correct. Janamejayastu rajarshir Janamejayasya raj Drishtva tam rishamagatam Saganho. There's a typo here. That should be a bhya, an aspirate bha, not the unaspirate ba. Listen. Sagano bhyudyayo yayao turnam Saganho bhyudhyayao turnam Pritya bharata sattamaha Janamejaya. So Sutta is narrating this, and he says that the Rajarshihi, the kingly rishi, or the king who is wise like a rishi, who is at Janamejaya. And what did he do? Drishtva tam, having seen him. Him who? Vyasa. So King Janamejaya, having seen the sage Vyasa, who is Agatam, Risham Agatam, seeing the Rishi Vyasa, who is arriving at his ritual, arriving at his palace, arriving at his front door, so to speak. Imagine Vyasa knocking on your front door. Big deal. And Vyasa arrives, Saganaha, together with all of his disciples. And we see a lot of attention to Vaishampayana, but we can imagine that Vyasa was accompanied by quite a number of his disciples. So he arrives, and what does Janamejaya do? He turnam, very quickly, abhyudhyayao. Then again, that's the typo. Bha, the aspirate bha, not the unaspirate bha. Abhyudhyayao. He quickly gets up and runs. Again, Vyasa is ringing your doorbell. What will you do? So, King Janamejaya, Turnam, very quickly, Abhyudhyayao, gets up. Oh, by the way, that Sagana is actually not Rishi and is not Vyasa and his disciples, but according to the grammar, Sagana means King Janamejaya and his ministers. So I misspoke before. You have to watch the grammar a little bit carefully to know what's going on here. So Vyasa arrives with his disciples, but the king, Janamejaya, Saganaha, along with all of his ministers, what does he do? Abhyudhyayao Turnam. He quickly gets up and goes to Vyasa Pritya, with so much love and reverence in his heart. And who is doing that? Bharata Sattama, the greatest king of that time, who is Janamejaya. So Vyasa, having arrived at Janamejaya's Sarpa Satra, then the king Janamejaya rushes with all of his ministers with great reference to meet the sage Vyasa. Tatropavishtam varadam, tatropavishtam devarshi gana pujitam, devarshi gana pujayamasa rajendraha, pujayamasa shastra drishtena karmana, shastra drishtena. And again, where the verses are just story, we'll go through them quickly. When we get into philosophical material, we'll slow down. But right now we're just saying story, so we'll continue to move ahead. Tatra upavishtam. So now talking about Vyasa, who upavishtam, entered. Tatra, there. He entered there into Janamejaya's palace, or wherever the rituals were taking place. And how is that Vyasa described? Vyasa is described here as Varadam, the giver of boons. Vyasa is also described as Devarshi Gana Pujitam. Vyasa is Pujita. He is worshipped, he is revered by Gana, by a group. Who are the Gana? Devarshi, the divine rishis. The divine rishis are not human beings. They're like Narada is an example of a Devarshi, a divine rishi. So Vyasa, who is worshipped by the divine rishis like Narada, what does he do? Tatra upavishtam, having entered into Janamejaya's palace for the ritual. And then what? Rajendraha, that greatest of kings, Janamejaya, what does Janamejaya do? Pujayamasa. He worships Vyasa. And he worships not in an ordinary way, but shastra drishtena karmana. He worships with karmana, with karmas which are shastra drishtena, which are seen in the Vedas. So he's worshipping him according to the shastric rules. And worship means the normal kind of worship done. We can just reflect for a moment. What did he do? No doubt he would have done para prakshalanam, washing of the feet. Now, sometimes we forget that that's not only a ritual, it also serves a practical reason. Vyasa has been walking over all these dusty roads. His feet are dirty, and he's about to enter Janamejaya's palace. Tell me, do you want someone tracking dirt into your home? So for that para prakshalana, washing of the feet, is done for that reason. But more than para prakshalana, para puja, worship of those feet, because Janamejaya reveres Vyasa. Everyone reveres Vyasa. Janamejaya in particular reveres Vyasa, who has come for his ritual. So Janamejaya is thrilled to have such an important person as Vyasa and his disciples present. So definitely pada puja, worship of Vyasa's holy feet, will be done. One more ritual will be done, and that is arati. And we forget the symbolism of arati, just as we forget the symbolism of this pada prakshalana. Washing the feet had a practical reason. In the same way, do you know that doing this arati has a practical reason? It does. Because suppose Vyasa arrives at night. Doesn't say, we don't know what time. Suppose Vyasa arrives at night in the palace. The palace is lit with all these oil lamps all over the place. But you know, these little lamps really don't throw that much light. Even if you have a dozen lamps around, they're not going to throw that much light. So if you have a special and honored guest arriving at your home, you're squinting in the darkness to see them. Wouldn't you like to see your special guest very clearly? Of course you would. What will you do to make sure you can see your guest clearly? You're going to take one of those lamps and put it on a tray, and you're going to hold it up in front of his face so you can see. This is the origin of our tradition of arati, showing the lights, because it equally applies in a temple. Now again, up until 100 years ago, there were no electric lights in temples. Nowadays, I have to share with you, it's a pet peeve of mine when you go into a beautiful ancient temple and there's this buzzing tube light right over the deity. I can't stand that. It bothers me. Anyway, in ancient times, there were no buzzing tube lights. So, and even in a very traditional temple, if you note, in the most traditional temples, you see mostly in South India, you'll see this, where there won't be any artificial light in the garbhagriha and the sanctum sanctorum. There'll be oil lamps are going, but once again, the oil lamps don't cast very much light. Further, the deity in South Indian temples are almost always made of black granite, dark stone. So now you have this dark form in a dimly lit sanctum sanctorum. You've come for worship. You can barely make out the form, which is why the priest comes with a tray, with a burning lamp or camphor, and notice what the priest does. He reveals to you. In fact, if you watch, some priests will actually reveal each part of the deity. They'll start with the head, and then they'll go to the left hand, and then the right hand. And then if there are 4 arms, then the other left hand, the other right hand, and then show this part, and then show this part, and this part, this part, this part, and then return to the face with that arati lamp. A skillful priest will do all of that. And that is, you can see the practical need for that kind of arati. The point is that lamp is essential. In the case of the palace, that lamp is essential for seeing Vyasa's face. And in the temple, that lamp is essential for seeing the deity in that temple. Just to finish that symbolism, by the way, just something you probably know, but if you don't know, you should know this. And this should also be passed on to children. And that is, why do we take that arati lamp? It's such a beautiful, beautiful symbolism. Not to know the symbolism, the reason why we do that is it's sad not to know it. So here's in the temple, and we're not talking about worship of Vyasa now, we're talking about worship of the deity in the temple. That lamp has been used to reveal Ishvara's presence in the temple, right? The lamp that reveals Ishvara's presence in the temple. What do you think that lamp represents? The light represents what can reveal Ishvara's presence here, now, throughout the cosmos. That light, of course, represents jnanam, knowledge. So that lamp, representing not ordinary knowledge, knowledge of Ishvara. So when the priest brings that lamp out to you, that lamp that represents knowledge of Ishvara, knowledge of God, what do? You want that knowledge. You take that. Now, of course, you have to take it in an appropriate way. Light belongs to the eyes. So you wouldn't I mean, sorry for being silly. You wouldn't take it to your mouth or to your ears? Sorry. You take that light to your eyes. It's a prayer. Look at this. The Ishvara, that lamp representing knowledge of Ishvara, that lamp which was able to make you see Ishvara's presence on the altar, Ishvara is also present within. And wouldn't you like to discover Ishvara's presence within? That's the meaning. It's a prayer. When you take that light, it's a prayer. May that light of knowledge that can reveal Ishvara's presence within me, may I be blessed with that knowledge of Ishvara. What a beautiful, profound meaning. So these are some of the rituals of reception. When Vyasa arrives at the palace, he's treated in this way. And of course, when we worship Lord on the altar, there was a time when Ishvara arrived on that altar, right? There was a time. The time of the temple consecration. So at the time of Kumbhabhishekam and Prana Pratishta, Ishvara was invited into the temple, and having been invited into the temple, then these rituals of worship continue from that day onwards. So here, just as the time of temple consecration, now coming back to our story, Vyasa is arriving at Janamejaya's palace, and it's an event equivalent to temple consecration. This holiest of rishis is arriving at his palace for the sake of his ritual that's going on, and so he receives Vyasa with great reverence. Pujaya Masa, Janamejaya worships Vyasa, Shastra Drishtena Karmana, with all the rituals that are taught in the scriptures, in the Vedas. Tatastam satkritam sarvaihi, tatastam satkritam sadasyar janame jayaha, sadasyar janame idam paschadvijashreshtam, idam paschadvide parya prachat kritanjalihi, parya prachat kritan. Tataha, then, tam, him, Vyasa. Vyasa, who is satkritam, he is worshipped, he is honored. He is honored by whom? Not just Janamejaya, but sarvaihi, by everyone. Who are those? Sadasyaihi, by everyone present in his palace. Everyone comes and participates in this worship of Vyasa. Then Janamejaya, what does Janamejaya do? Now go down to the last line. Janamejaya pari aprachat, he asks Vyasa. He asks Vyasa how, kritanjalihi, with his hands folded, and he asks Vyasa paschat, after Vyasa was worshipped by everyone at the palace, King Janamejaya, with his hands folded, he asked idam, this which is going to be described in the next verses, and he asks this of who? Vyasa, who is Dvija Shreshtam, the most exalted of Brahmanas, the best of sages. So what does King Janamejaya ask? Now, notice when it says Janamejaya, we're now in the middle story. Up to this point, Sutta was narrating. So Sutta is talking, but now Sutta is quoting what Janamejaya is saying. So this is the story within the story. Sutta is telling all of this, but in his narration of the story, now he's going to narrate what Janamejaya is saying. Sutta is saying what Janamejaya is saying. Janamejaya uvacha, Janamejaya uvacha. And what does Janamejaya ask? Kurunam Pandavanam cha Kurunam Pandavanam Bhavan Pratyakshadarshirvan Bhavan Pratyakshadarshi Tesham Charitram Ichchami Tesham Charitram Katyamanam Tvaya Dvaja Katyamanam. So this is Janamejaya's request of Vyasa. He says in the second line, Bhavan, you, O Lord. It's the formal term of respect, formal term of address. So here, if Janamejaya is going to address Vyasa, he's going to use very formal language, not like "Hey you," but very formally. You know, like most Indian languages make that distinction between tu, tum, and ap. So this is the formal term of address, like ap. Bhavan is like ap, you, formal. You are Pratyakshadarshirvan. You are someone who has seen with his own eyes. Pratyakshadarshirvan. You, Vyasa, have seen with your own eyes what went on in Hastinapur and on the battlefield. You, Vyasa, have seen what went on with your own eyes. What went on about whom? Kurunam, what happened for the Kurus, the Kauravas, and Pandavanam, and the Pandavas. Whatever happened to the Kauravas and Pandavas, you have seen with your own eyes, O Vyasa. Tesham charitram, whatever they did, whatever were the activities, Tesham, of them, of the Pandavas and Kauravas, whatever was their activities, Ichchami, I want to hear. I want to learn about the activities of the Kauravas and Pandavas. Katyamanam Tvaya, narrated by you. Katyamanam, narrated Tvaya, by you. Dvaja, he addresses Vyasa. O Brahmana, O best of Brahmana, I want to hear this from you. Why? You have seen with your own eyes what happened to the Kauravas and Pandavas. Please tell me. And what does Janamejaya want to know in particular? Katam samabhavat bhedas, katam samabhavat bhedas, tesham aklishta karmanam, tesham aklishta tacha yuddham katam vriddham, tacha yuddham katam vriddham, bhutanta karanam mahata, bhutanta karanam mahata. Janamejaya asks, Katam, how? Some abhavat. How did it happen? How did what happen? Bhedaha. Bheda here means conflict. So the conflict between the Kauravas and Pandavas, Katam bhedaha abhavat. How did it happen? After all, these were illustrious members of a great clan, and remember that they're all cousins. So how is this fighting how did this terrible fight break out inside of this great clan? By the way, technically they are all descendants of Kuru, therefore technically they're all Kauravas, but we tend to use Kaurava to talk about the sons of Dhritarashtra as opposed to Pandavas, the sons of Pandu. But really, they're all part of the same family. They're all Kauravas. So how could this happen in that family? I have to say, I'm sometimes baffled when some of you will return from India and you'll come in and tell me, Swamiji, you won't believe what's happening in my family. It's amazing, some of the fighting. Of course, not just your family, anyone's family. Some of the fighting that goes on in families, and sadly it's often over inheritance and other issues. and really terrible fighting, and it just makes me really sad to hear about this, but it happens. It happens in modern times. It happened in ancient times. So don't think yours is the only family that has this problem. You're in great company if a great family, if a great lineage, like the lineage of King Kuru, if they're fighting, then that there might be some fights in your family is not surprising. So his first question is katam, how? How did that bhedaha, how did that conflict, some abhavat, how did it arise? Tesham, for them, aklishta karmanam. Interesting observation. For them, the Kurus, who are aklishta karmanam, those who have no bad karma. Aklishta karmanam. For that family which is blessed with so much good karma, for that family which seems to have no bad karma, for that noble, sacred, honorable family, how could this happen? So the term used here, it's interesting, the choice of terms. Aklishta karma means someone who is not troubled by bad karma. Wait a minute. Show me one person who is not troubled by the effects of papa karma. This is an observation on life, and that is, no matter how blessed someone might be. Now think about this Kuru lineage. So we really need to get it clear. They run the kingdom. They own the wealth of the kingdom. They're in charge. They are as good as gods in their kingdom. They have this incredibly exalted status. And you might think someone who has this incredibly exalted status, they're just living the life of luxury, as we say. And sometimes we falsely get that idea. Sometimes we hear about somebody who's very wealthy or someone family that's very fortunate, and you say, oh, they've got it made. You've said that, right? You've looked at some family or someone who has tremendous wealth, and you say, wow, they've got it made. They've got it so easy. What a wonderful life they have. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. No matter how much money they have, no matter how wonderful their family is, you can be absolutely sure that they are going to suffer terribly from time to time. Why? Human birth is the result of a combination of punya and papa karma. If you only had punya karma, you wouldn't be on this planet. You'd be in some swarga someplace, some kind of heaven. Similarly, if you only had papa, you wouldn't be on this planet. Human birth is defined as a birth which is a result of a combination of punya and papa karma. One of Puja Swamiji's jokes, you probably haven't heard this one. The term Mishra means combination. It's also a common North Indian name. And so occasionally, Puja Swamiji will turn to an audience and say, you're all Mishras. As if they all have the same surname, Mishra, which they don't, of course, but he's making a point, and that is all human beings are the result of punya, papa, karma, mishra, the combination of punya and papa karma. So that means that no matter how blessed and exalted a family might be, they're guaranteed to suffer. Don't think they're not suffering, they do suffer. And that fellow who wins that $200 million lottery, and you're thinking that they're made for the rest of their life. They're never going to be sad. They're never going to be miserable. Let me share this with you. There was actually a psychological study. Some PhD person did a study on a group of lottery winners and tracked how happy they were. Scientists like to make graphs. So I imagine in this scientific paper, having studied this population of lottery winners, so they would measure if you won a $10 million lottery, if you got a $100 million lottery, and then they'd plot the happiness over time. This is 1 year, this is 2 years, this is 3 years, this is 4 years. So what would they find out? If you won a $10 million lottery, what happened? Huge spike of happiness. Which would go right back to the same level. Whatever level they started off with, after several years, they would return to exactly the same level of happiness. This is actually a scientific study. So obviously the huge happiness when you first get it, but over a period of time, it wears off. And guess what they discovered? Those who got the $100 million lottery, they were even happier. And over a period of time, they too returned to the same level of happiness that led some scientists to posit a set point of happiness people have. And they actually attribute it to genetics. I don't know if they have any hard evidence for that, but some scientists will say that you are genetically programmed to have a certain level of happiness. There might be some element of truth to it. We could say from another level, I would say more powerful than genetics is your attitude. Depending on your attitude, depending on the way you think, depending on your values, how you were raised, all of these factors, I think we do have a set point of happiness, but I think it's perhaps less determined by genetics and more determined by our thinking. And we'll talk more about that as we continue. Obviously, one thing the teachings of Vedanta do is raise that average level. I'm convinced about that. Anyway, that's a little aside here. Okay. What we're talking about is actually the flip side. That most miserable family, that's someone who everything goes wrong, they don't have enough money, they don't have jobs, they don't have a house, they don't have this, they don't have that, they're just suffering. You can be absolutely sure that wonderful things will happen to them at some point in their lives. Guaranteed. Why? Karma Mishra. We are all born with a mixture of punya and papa karmas. The punya karmas we're born with guarantee we will have wonderful things happen to us that we don't deserve based on our actions in this life. Please listen very carefully. The language is important. Wonderful punya karmas guarantee that we will all receive wonderful things that we don't deserve based on our actions in this life. We receive them according to good actions in past lives. Similarly, we are all born with papa karma, mishra, combination, which means we are all guaranteed to undergo suffering that we don't deserve based on our actions in this life. Guaranteed. Due to the papa karmas we're born with, we are all guaranteed to undergo some suffering that we don't deserve based on our actions in this life, but we do deserve based on our actions in past lives. So, what about these members of the Kuru clan? even though they are exalted in a worldly sense, and that's why they're called here aklishta karmanam. If you didn't have a lot of good karmas, you wouldn't end up as the rulers of the kingdom with a lot of wealth and power. The fact that they are rulers of the kingdom with so much wealth and power is evidence of their good karmas. Aklishta. Aklishta means absence of bad karma, presence of good karma. But does it mean they have no bad karmas at all? They do. And they suffer like anything as a result. One of the very vivid messages of the entire Mahabharata is how everyone suffers as a result of karma. Sometimes we suffer also as a result of our own actions, but in addition to suffering as a result of our own mistakes, we also suffer as a result of karma. And there's no way to avoid it. Well, the way to avoid it, of course, is become enlightened in a way that whatever happens in life won't affect you. There's nothing we can do about the fact that life includes suffering. But what we can do is, it's a funny word, immunize ourselves against the suffering. Seriously, you can become immune to that suffering. And that's what the teachings of Vedanta are all about, to make you immune to the suffering that is inevitable. Okay, back to our verse. Tesham aklishta karmanam. So for those who were so blessed to be exalted as the head of the kingdom and possessing so much wealth, katam samabhavat bhedaha. How did that conflict take place in that family and tear the family apart? Tatcha, and further, katam yuddham vrittam. And how did that terrible war take place? Not just bheda. Bheda means conflict. There's a difference between bheda and yuddha. In your family, there is bheda. Thank goodness there's no yuddha. Yuddha means picking up a weapon and going after them. So in your family, there might be bheda, but in this family, in addition to bheda, conflict, there was actual yuddha, actual war. And not merely war, but bhuta antakaram. Mahat bhuta antakaram. That which caused the destruction of so many people. That which led to the death. Bhuta anta. The death of a living person. Bhuta antakaram. That which caused the death of so many people. That mahat yuddham, that terrible war, that huge war that caused so many deaths. How did that happen? This is Janamejaya's question to the sage Vyasa. Now notice this is in the middle story, but now watch. Sutta vacha. So now we're on the outside story. Tasya tadvachanam shutva, tasya tadvachanam Krishna dvaipayanastada, Krishna dvaipayanastada, shashasa shishyam hasinam, shashasa shishyam hasi, vaishampayanamantike, vaishampayanamantike. Sutta said, so now Sutta is narrating this stuff to Shaunaka. So now we've shifted from Janamajaya's palace. Now we are back in Naimisha, Aranya, where Sutta explains, Tasya tadvachanam shrutva, Vyasa shrutva. Look at the second line. Krishna dvaipayanaha. We saw the meaning of his name. That's the name for Vyasa. Vyasa, who was Krishna, his skin was dark because his mother's skin was dark. He was also dvaipayana because his mother gave birth to him on an island. So this becomes one of his names, Vyasa, Krishna Dvaipayana. Tada, then, Krishna Dvaipayana, the sage Vyasa, first line, Tasya tadvachanam shrutva, having heard the question of King Janamejaya, hearing King Janamajaya's question, then what did Vyasa do? Shashasa. He instructed. He instructed whom? Shishyam, his student. Which student? Vaishampayanam. He instructed his student, Vaishampayana, who was asinam, seated, antike, nearby. Notice we have to kind of collect the words in the proper order. So what happened is King Janamejaya asked Vyasa to narrate the story, but now Vyasa is giving the instruction to his student Vaishampayana. He's going, and we'll see in the next verse, he asks his student Vaishampayana to narrate instead. And that's exactly what we will see. Vyaso vacha, vyaso. Notice we just went to the inner story now. All right? And what does Vyasa say? Kurunam pandavanancha, kurunam pandava, yatha bhedo bhavat pura, yatha bhedo bhavat, tadasmai sarvam ha chakshva, tadasmai sarvam ha, yanmatta shutavanasi, yanmatta shutavan. In the second line, Yatha Bhedaha. So this is Vyasa's instruction to Vaishampayana to narrate. Yatha Bhedaha, the manner in which that conflict, abhavat, took place, pura, so long ago, the way that conflict between the Pandavas and Kauravas, in fact, Kurunam, between the Kurus, and Pandavanam, and Pandavas, pura, long ago, Yatha Bhedaha abhavat, the manner in which that conflict took place, tat, that, asmai, unto him, and you can imagine he's pointing, Vyasa is pointing at whom? Janamejaya. Asmai, unto him, unto King Janamejaya, sarvam achakshva, tell him everything. Achakshva, sarvam, tell him everything, yat mattaha shutavanasi. Tell everything which shrutavan, you, asi, you have heard, shrutavanasi, you have heard, mattaha, from me. Vyasa says, tell Janamejaya everything, the whole story, every last detail, according to what you have already heard from me. So this is Vaishampayana's instruction to his student. This is Vyasa's instruction to his student Vaishampayana. Then we bounce back out to the outer story. Suto vacha, gurur vachanam hagnyaya, gurur vachanam satu viprarshabhastada, satu viprarshabhasta, achachakshetata sarvam, achachakshetata itihasam puratanam, itihasam. Start in the second line. Tada, then, saha, he. And who is he? Now we're talking about Vaishampayana. Vaishampayana, who is about to narrate the whole story to Janamejaya. So saha, him, Vaishampayana, who is Vipra Rishabha, a bull, literally, a bull among Brahmins, means the best of Brahmins. It's a term of respect. So Vaishampayana, who is the best of Brahmins, what did he do? Now, first line, Guroho vachanam agnyaya. Agnyaya, being instructed, Guroho vachanam, by the words of his teacher. having received his teacher's Vyasa. Vaishampayana, having been instructed by Vyasa to tell the story to Janamejaya, then what did Vaishampayana do in the third line? Achachakshe tataha. Tataha, thereafter, achachakshe, he narrated sarvam, the whole thing. The whole thing means what? Some 86,000 verses are going to follow. Sarvam means sarvam, the whole thing. The whole what? Itihasam, the whole story. Most of you know the word itihasa as history. You know, the Sanskrit is wonderful. If you're telling a story, the way you end a story, if a storyteller is telling you a story, how do they end a story? Iti ha asa. Thus, indeed, it was. Thus, indeed, it was. That's how you end the story. So therefore, the story ended up being called itihasa. It comes from those Sanskrit terms. So this itihasa, this story, Puratanam, this ancient story, okay, question for you. This ancient story, wait a minute, Vyasa is sitting there. He's still alive. How are they going to talk about ancient story? Well, they're going to go back. The story starts before Vyasa. So the story is going to reach back into history and then go forward in time. And that's what we will see as we proceed, as Janamejaya now is going to be, Vaishampayana now is going to begin his narration of the story, of that huge story. He's going to narrate it to King Janamejaya. That concludes chapter 54. And now we go on to chapter 55. By the way, if you go to our website, you can print these out. There was a problem on our website. It was corrected. But sometimes we have a little glitch on our website, so if you had a problem printing it out, the problem got solved last night about 8 o'clock. So you can get the printout. So this is the next section. By the way, for the next few years, what we're going to be doing is seeing sections which I've collated by topic. So, wait a minute. Sorry, I didn't get the thing up here for you properly. This one. No. Nope. Oh, sorry. Too many buttons. All right. We'll try this. There we go. All right. So I have, as I mentioned in the very first class, I went through the whole story and then found topics. And those topics are arranged in a group of slides, which you can get from our website, or we'll see here. And so this is the second of our excerpts, the second of our topics. And it's drawn from the Adi Parva. We're still in the first book, the first of the 18 books of the Mahabharata. It says that out of those 225 chapters in the Mahabharata, we are seeing chapters 55 and 56, selected verses from chapters 55, 56. And the content of that is Vaishampayana's introduction. So far, we're hearing we're hearing a lot from Janamejaya. We heard a little bit from Shaunaka. We heard quite a bit from Sutta. Now we're going to hear from Vaishampayana. Vaishampayana, by the way, is the main narrator throughout the Mahabharata. Occasionally you'll bounce out to the outer story and hear Sutta narrating, but the vast bulk of the Mahabharata is in the words of Vaishampayana. So we'll see. And we're now seeing Vaishampayana speaking for the first time. He's going to give an introduction. He's also going to summarize the teachings of the story of the Mahabharata. We'll see that as we proceed. Vaishampayana uvacha, Vaishampayana uvacha. In the entire Mahabharata, there is no line that is recited more than this one. This comes again and again and again and again because he is the main narrator. So if you're studying the whole thing, you will see this line many, many times. So what does he say? Remember now we're in the inner story, and he's addressing King Janamejaya during an interval, during a break in the Sarpa Satra, and a break in the snake sacrifice. Gurave prang namaskritya, Gurave prang namaskrit, Mano buddhi samadhi bihi, Mano buddhi samadhi, Sampuja cha Dvajan sarvan, Sampuja cha Dvajan, Tatanyan vidusho janan, Tatav. So, Vyasa begins speaking. When Prak, first, namaskritya, first having bowed to whom? Gurave, to his guru. Who is his guru? Vyasa. So the first thing Vaishampayana does before he narrates anything, his guru has just asked him to narrate, but before he starts narrating, he comes over. I suppose he would touch his guru's feet, namaskritya, having bowed to his guru, Gurave, to Vyasa. And how does he bow? Mano buddhi samadhi bihi. You know, there are different ways of bowing. Sometimes it's done very casually, kind of like as a formal, I'm supposed to do this. And then on the other extreme, you have this shashtanga namaskaram. You just lay down flat and prostrate yourself completely. So he says here that namaskritya, having bowed first to my teacher, manas buddhi samadhi bihi, with mind and intellect collected, focused on his teacher, with full intent, with full reverence, sampujya cha, and also having worshipped not just Vyasa, but Dvajan Sarvan, having worshipped all of the brahmanas present. There are many brahmanas present for this Sarpa Satra of Janamejaya. I could imagine dozens or even hundreds. And tata, before we see that last time. And the rule is that Vaishampayana has to worship and respect each one of them. There could be hundreds. I'm told some of you, at the time of your wedding, there's a tradition in many families where you have to do namaskaram, touch the feet of every guest who's older than you. You may or may not have done this in your wedding. It's commonly done. There could be dozens or hundreds. So you're going to get as we say in American English, you'll get a workout again and again doing namaskaram. So we can presume that Vaishampayana did similarly. He touched the feet sarvan dvajan of all of the assembled brahmanas, tata, and not only the brahmanas. You think only the brahmanas get respect? Tata, and also anyan vidishaha janan, other wise people. They may not have been brahmanas, but those janan, those people, were vidushaha. They were wise. They were learned. So, Vaishampayana, before beginning his narration, he first honors his guru, Vyasa. He then honors all the other assembled brahmanas and wise people. And then what does he do? Maharshir sarva lokeshu, Maharshir sarva lokeshu, Vishrutasya dhimataha, Vishrutasyasyadhi Pravakshyami matam kritsnam Pravakshyami matak Vyasasyamita tejasaha Vyasasyamita Maharshehe sarvalokeshu. Okay. In the third line, we'll start there. Vaishampayana says, Pravakshyami, I will tell. I will tell you, O King Janamejaya. Pravakshyami, I will tell you, I will narrate Kritsnam, the entire story. The entire story, which is matam, which is the understanding of who? Vyasasya. Vyasasya matam. The story according to Vyasa. So the story according to Vyasa, Vyasa who is Amita Tejasaha, Amita Tejas, whose brilliance is measureless. Nice term. One of measureless brilliance is Amita Tejas. So of Vyasa, whose brilliance is immeasurable, his matam, the Krishna matam, his entire story, Pravakshyami, I will tell. I will tell the story, Maharshehe, the story, now we're in the first line, the story of this Maharshi, of this great Rishi, Vyasa, who is, and Vyasa, who is Sarva Lokeshu Vishrutasya. This is all praise of Vyasa. So in beginning his narration, do you know, it's really, this needs to be said in order to get the sense of it, when a shishya has to speak in the presence of his guru, that's really tricky. Your own guru is listening, and it's like you're a little hesitant. And it happens. I just share with you a wonderful memory of mine. When I was a young student, this would be in the 1980s, I was traveling with Puja Swamiji. We were in Chennai. He was giving some public talks at the big auditorium there. And what he would do is, at the beginning of each of his talks, he'd have some of his devotees talk. And then it turns out that on this particular night, I didn't know that I would be chosen to stand up there. There were over 1,000 people in that hall. I don't remember how many, but definitely it was big. And then he he points to me and he tells me, okay, today you are going up just before the program. It wasn't that, not during the program, but before the program. He told me that I would be invited up. And so I had a few minutes to think about what I would talk, because you need to have something in your head to talk. So I stood up there, and there are two issues. One is talking before 1,000 people. If you're not used to it, it's a little intimidating. You can understand. But I'll tell you what was more intimidating than talking before those 1,000 people was talking before my guru, because he's sitting in the front row. So I'm standing right in front of him, and now I'm supposed to talk and say something. Very intimidating to talk in front of one's guru. And perhaps Vaishampayana felt the same kind of pressure, which is why he's kind of going overboard on praising his guru before he begins talking. That's what he's doing here. So he first, I'll put it in my own words. My guru has asked me to tell you the story. You remember, he's talking to Janamejaya. He says, my guru has asked me to narrate his story. My guru, who is Amita Tejas, my guru whose brilliance is immeasurable, my guru who is a Maharshi, my guru who is a great sage, my guru who is Sarva Lokeshu Vishrutaha, my guru who is famous, not just in this world, in all the worlds. my Guru who is famous in all the worlds, and my Guru who is dhimataha, my Guru who is so wise. So notice all the praise of his Guru that comes in this verse, perhaps because Vaishampayana was a little hesitant to teach with his own Guru, Vyasa, right there. And then he continues. Shrinu rajan yatha bhedaha, Shrinu rajan yatha Kuru pandavayor abhut, Kuru pandavayor rajarte dyuta sambhuto, rajarte bhuta sambhut, vanavasastataiva cha, vanavasastataiva. Shrinu Rajan. Rajan, O King Janamejaya, Shrinu. Suno. They sound similar for a very obvious reason. Suno is derived from Shrinu. Listen. Listen yatha bhedaha. Listen yatha to the manner in which the bheda, that conflict. What conflict? Kuru Pandava yoho. The conflict between the Kauravas and Pandavas. Listen to how the Bhedaha abhut, how that conflict took place. Listen, O king, to the story about how that conflict between the Pandavas and Kurus took place. Also, Rajyarte Dhyuta Sambhutaha. This Dhyuta Sambhuta, that carefully arranged dice game, which was Raja Artha, for the sake of the kingdom. Remember, and we're going to see some references to the story. So remember Shakuni's dice game where he cheated Yudhishthira. So this is a reference. So he's going to say, and that dice game that took place, Raja Arte, for the sake of the kingdom. I'm going to tell you that. I'll tell you about the dice game. Not only that, Vanavasaha tata evacha, and also I will tell you about the Vanavasa, the 14 years of exile outside of the kingdom for the Pandavas. He says, I will tell you all of that. Not only that, Yatha yuddham abhavat, Prativikshayakarakam, Prativikshayakar, Tatteham sampravakshyami, Tatteham sampravakshyami, Prachate bharatarshava, Prachate bharatar. Yathacha, and also I'm going to tell you about Yuddham Abhavat, how that war took place. And it wasn't any ordinary war. What was that? Yuddham Prativi Kshaya Karakam. That war that literally destroyed the earth, but the sense is destroyed the kingdom. Do you know, it was so violent. If you remember during the Cold War, where we were all thinking about nuclear Armageddon, right? We're thinking what would take place if there was truly a nuclear exchange between the Soviets and this country. You couldn't even imagine the scale of the destruction. Well, guess what was left after the end of the 18-day war? It was the ancient equivalent of nuclear Armageddon. Honestly, it is so bloody and total was the destruction. And that's why it's called here Prativi Kshaya Karakam. The war was said to have led to the destruction of the earth, meaning the destruction of the entire kingdom. Tatte aham pravakshyami. Aham, I, pravakshyami, I will tell. Tatte, I will tell that to you. Why? Prachate, because you've asked. I will tell that which you have asked. I will tell you that. Bharatarshava, O mighty king, I will tell you all of that which took place. Okay. Just a kind of a funny comment here. Actually, we'll save that for next time. So when we meet next time, he's going to begin. Actually, I'll share this with you right now. It's significant. Vyasa asked him to tell the whole thing, Krishna, the whole thing. So Vaishampayana does tell him the whole thing in a couple dozen verses. Which means he tells the whole story in a summary fashion from beginning to end, but without the detail. And that's what we're going to see in the next class, is we're going to see like a 12 verse summary of the entire story of the Mahabharata. So here, Vaishampayana is following his guru's instructions. The guru says, tell the whole story. And so he does, but without all the details. And then after that, then King Janamejaya says, okay, thanks for the summary. Now tell me in detail. And we'll see all that in our next class. All right, some important announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday. Oh, just a friendly word of advice. Set your clocks back tonight so that you're on time you're at the right time for your programs tomorrow. Tomorrow we have our children's class at 11 o'clock. By the way, we're still looking for some people to help teach the children. If you're interested in teaching children, you might like to come and observe the class, so just to get an idea of what goes on. So that children's class is at 11 o'clock. Then you can see me or see Vasanti, and then we'll get you on board. Also, the mindful awareness meditation will take place tomorrow, as usual, at 5 o'clock. Then at 6:15, I usually have satsang, question answer, but tomorrow we're having a guided contemplation, nididhyasana, a little bit more advanced kind of meditation session. So you are welcome to come and join us. 6:15, then will be guided contemplation that I'll conduct. And going forward, we're going to do that on every first Sunday of the month. So from this point forward, the first Sunday of each month, we'll have a guided contemplation. Of course, I'll announce it. Next Saturday, we're going to be celebrating Deepavali, so please plan on coming and joining us for that celebration. We'll begin at 11 o'clock. As usual, we'll have some simple puja and chanting. We'll have a nice discourse for the occasion. Also, if you're coming, please bring a dish of food. There's a sign-up sheet over on the counter, and we need the sign-up sheet to be filled out by the end of class today so we can have enough food for everyone. And library will be open after class. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.